Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about 34 ways you can beat your anxiety naturally. And I will be going through a list of 34 ways you can reduce anxiety. Most of them are natural, some of them are pharmaceutical, but this should be a comprehensive overview of how you can manage an anxiety disorder and not be so panicky. So once again, all of the information is in the description. So if you want to skip the video and just read the information, you can do that in the description, but we will be doing a PowerPoint and we'll get started with that now. So the first thing you can do to reduce anxiety, the first thing I'd recommend is exercise. In one study, there was a 42% reduction in anxiety in those who regularly exercised. In a study of cross-country skier racers, 42% less chance of having an anxiety disorder if you were in a competitive amateur ski race in Switzerland. So this was a study in Switzerland of cross-country skiers, and it showed you had a 42% less chance of developing an anxiety disorder if you participated in this event. Though I should note that women who were ultra competitive actually had an increased rate of anxiety. So if you're hitting the gym a little bit too hard, it might not be as good for you as if you're doing a less ultra competitive routine, because maybe the competition itself can stress you out. The next thing I'll mention is, but that was for women only, competitive men did not get stressed out. Next thing I'll mention is yoga. Yoga helps anxiety. A 52% reduction, so a bigger reduction than exercise, and it is likely slightly less effective in men. That is because men are much less flexible, and I believe men produce about 4% less oxytocin, which is perhaps the chemical that gets released during yoga that helps with anxiety, though there might be other effect modes that I have not covered here, but it does, the top line is that it's a 52% reduction in anxiety if you participate in yoga. Next thing I'll mention is probiotic yogurt, or even more effective than probiotic yogurt is a probiotic capsule, which had 5 or 6 strains in it. Probiotic yogurt usually has less bacterial diversity than the capsule in this case. It reduced anxiety, depression, and stress by about 45%. So you can see my references for details on the types of bacteria that were in the yogurt and the probiotic capsule. But I would recommend trying either yogurt or, better than yogurt, kefir with some probiotic strains, or you can buy a probiotic capsule or a probiotic mix from Amazon, and that should effectively reduce your anxiety score. Do know that these first 3 things are actually more effective than a benzodiazepine pill or an antidepressant, which are the 2 main go-tos for psychiatry to reduce anxiety in people, are those 2 things. But if you do exercise, yoga, or a probiotic yogurt, you should get a greater effect than an anti-anxiety pill or an antidepressant pill. Next thing I'll mention is fish oil. Fish oil was given at 2.5 grams a day. There was a 20% reduction in anxiety in non-diagnosed students. So it might be more effective in people actually diagnosed with anxiety, but there was a reduction in anxiety of 20% for those who did not have an anxiety disorder. So we'll go to the next page here. Maladaptive coping. So if you are a poor coper, better coping strategies reduce anxiety. 1 point worse in how you manage to cope with something equals 1 point worse in anxiety, depression, and stress. Examples of maladaptive coping are avoiding issues, seeking distractions, alcohol, drugs, denial, self-blame. I'm not really an expert on coping strategies, but maladaptive coping is a big issue for some people with anxiety. Another thing you can work on is lifestyle. People with better lifestyles have lower anxiety. Friends, good family, happiness with school. This was done on students. And financial resources weren't measured in this study, but I would predict they might have a beneficial effect on anxiety. However, lifestyle was much less important than maladaptive coping. 1 point worse in lifestyle equaled only 0.11 worse score in anxiety. So maladaptive coping was about 10 times more important than lifestyle in reducing or its effect on anxiety. Here are some supplements you can take besides the probiotic. Inositol had a 7 times reduction in panic score, which is 2.5 times better than a placebo, and it was as effective as a benzodiazepine pill, except it's not habit forming. So benzodiazepines, you're recommended to take them for less than 6 weeks, I believe. But within inositol, you don't have to worry about that. And it also kicks in quite fast. So it kicks in as fast as your body absorbs a benzodiazepine. Inositol kicks in just as fast. Lavender is the next thing I'll mention. It helps anxiety, depression, sleep, and restlessness. It's slightly more effective than a benzodiazepine pill. It has been used for anxiety for many years now, probably hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years. And it's more effective than a benzodiazepine pill in a double-blinded study, which is usually considered the gold standard of a study, though case studies, all studies, all honest studies are fantastic in my opinion. So I pull from a number of different resources when doing these presentations. It is similar. It's more effective than a benzodiazepine pill, but it's similar in effectiveness to an antidepressant, because antidepressants are slightly more effective for anxiety than an anti-anxiety pill, though they have a different focus, which wouldn't be depression, but focusing on increasing serotonin helps anxiety quite a lot. Next thing I'll mention is sarcosine. It helps anxiety more than an antidepressant. It helps depression more too, so it's more effective in curing anxiety and depression than a antidepressant. And it has less side effects than an antidepressant, so that's positive also. But it still has some side effects. And I would encourage you, for all the things I mentioned in this video, please do your own research on possible side effects and possible drug interactions with other supplements or pharmaceuticals you are taking, because this is kind of a cursory look focused just on anxiety, and there are other tertiary effects that I will not have gone into in this video. So please, before taking it, look into it a little bit more to make sure it is right for you. Passion flower is the next thing I'll mention. It increases the neurotransmitter GABA. It is just as effective as a benzodiazepine in a double-blinded study again, so that's a good sign. The next thing I'll mention is lemon balm tea. It increases GABA like passion flower. It helps with stress, a 70% reduction, and helps 80% of people with sleep. The next thing I'll mention is emotional freedom technique, which helped 10% in one study and 40% in another study. I'm not sure exactly all that it entails, so you'll please look up emotional freedom technique online, but it is a mostly psychological kind of spiritual way of improving your symptoms of anxiety. The next thing I'll mention is forest bathing. It had a 34% reduction in anxiety in patients in a mental hospital, and these patients had psychotic disorders and depression and stuff like that, and it was a 34% reduction in anxiety if they lay under a tree for a period. And forest bathing is actually fairly popular in Japan, I'm told, at least. Next thing I'll mention is microbiome. There's a company called Viome that measures your microbiome. I have done Viome, and it provided some interesting information for me. They also provide precision nutrients and diet suggestions. And if you followed the precision nutrients and the diet suggestions, people had a 40% improvement in severe cases of anxiety, a 15% improvement in moderate cases of anxiety, and an 18% improvement in mild cases of anxiety. So looking at your microbiome may provide useful information in helping your anxiety. Next thing I'll mention is ginkgo biloba, which is another herb, and it had a 40% reduction in anxiety, though 19% could be placebo. Bromide is a Ayurvedic medicine that came out of India. It had an 18% reduction in anxiety, and that reduction was in healthy people. So it's unknown if it's, I would surmise it's more effective in anxious patients than non-anxious patients. But that is unknown because it was only tested in healthy people, and it did reduce their anxiety, but they did not have an anxiety disorder. Meditation is 15 to 20% reduction in anxiety. Once again, it was done in healthy subjects, and it could be a placebo effect. A sauna. In this case, they use far infrared sauna, which is good for stimulating underneath your skin, your mitochondria and stuff like that. It had a 17% reduction in anxiety, again, in non-anxious people. So it could be more effective if you have an anxiety disorder to get into a sauna and heat yourself up. And I would suspect that a dry sauna would also be somewhat effective, though a far infrared sauna might be better. I'm not sure. Gut bacteria. We mentioned the probiotic in our third tip, but another gut bacterial, Lactobacillus helveticus, R0052, and Bifidobacterium longum, R0175, both improved anxiety and depression by 25% when supplemented. Here's a hormone, progesterone. A woman sometimes have hormones, often have hormones that go up and down quite a bit from period to period. And low levels of progesterone are associated with anxiety, insomnia, fatigue, and irritability. So that might be something worth checking out. Chamomile tea helps more than a placebo. And, you know, I'm sure many of you have heard that chamomile tea has a calming effect, and it does indeed, according to a study, have a calming effect. Getting a pet may help with anxiety. I couldn't find any studies indicating that was the case, but I have heard anecdotally that having a little furry companion can be helpful in reducing anxiety. So James Greenblatt from Psychiatry Redefined, excellent professor of medicine from Tufts University, I believe, in the States. He recommends magnesium, vitamin D, or better than vitamin D supplementation is getting some sunlight. And sunlight, though getting sunlight does increase your chances of getting melanoma of the skin, cancer of the skin, getting sunlight reduces your chances of heart disease and other causes of death by a greater degree than the risk of death from melanoma. So getting sunlight is actually a net increase in your lifespan. It increases vitamin D, and as long as you don't peel. So as long as your skin doesn't peel off, if you just tan, or if you just don't tan, but as long as you don't peel, it is a life-extending thing to involve yourself with. So I recommend going to a beach and getting some sun, and not worrying so much about sunscreen, actually, because as long as you don't peel, you don't have to worry as much about sunscreen, but you will peel if you get too much midday sun. So you have to know your limits and watch for that, and it depends on the melanin in your skin, how much sunlight you can get without getting a severe burn. So another thing James Greenblatt recommends is B vitamin, vitamin B3. And he also recommends inositol, but we've gone through that one already. And I just, a lot of people are deficient in magnesium, so it's often quite helpful. Vitamin D is also often quite helpful. Not sure his thinking on B3, so that's a question mark there, but he does recommend it, and inositol is quite helpful. I do not know the percentage effect on anxiety for magnesium, vitamin D, or B3, but inositol is definitely quite helpful, as we went through earlier. True Hope, a fantastic company out of Utah, and I think it was originally based in Alberta, Canada, has a product, EMP Empower Plus, which is a multivitamin that's directed to providing all the nutrients your brain needs, and it may provide some benefits. That's kind of a little bit of an unknown, but it is good to feed your body the things it requires. Another thing we'll mention is helminth therapy. So these are, I've mentioned these in a previous video or two, but they're symbiotic intestinal worms, and HDC is the one they used in this study, and it had a 70% reduction in symptoms of anxiety. These people were people likely with an anxiety disorder, and it was a very small study. So read it with a grain of salt, because there were, I believe, less than 8 people in the study. So helminth therapy, symbiotic intestinal worms, or another route you can potentially go to reducing your levels of anxiety, though we're getting a little bit further away. I kind of listed the most effective ones at the start. So another thing I do not recommend is LSD. Going on a psychedelic trip can reduce anxiety. It can lead to, spiritual growth in some people, but it's also dangerous because it can lead to spiritual death in some people too. So I do not recommend LSD. These 3 things were suggested for anxiety, but they're not that effective. So, but I'll go through them here. Kava, it may help anxiety. 20% improvement in one study, almost no difference in another study. Valerian may help anxiety. Hops. So hops is used to make beer. It had a 13% reduction in anxiety. Non-alcoholic beer was used. Interesting to note that time to fall asleep was reduced by 41% in those who had a non-alcoholic beer before bed. And there was a 24% reduction in anxiety in another study from having beer, and they had 14 days of 333 milliliters of non-alcoholic beer. Could be a placebo, but the reduction in time to fall asleep is too large to just be a placebo. So the anxiety effect could be a placebo, but a non-alcoholic beer does help you fall to sleep. So if you have trouble sleeping, that might be an interesting thing to do. Do note that you should be anxious if you are in imminent danger. It heightens your awareness. It makes you more alert. It makes you more perceptive. It makes you more cautious. It makes you stronger. So if you are actually in a dangerous situation, it is good to be anxious to help keep yourself safe. So take precautions. Be situationally aware. A constantly dangerous situation is not ideal and seems unlikely unless you live in a more dangerous area. The United States and Latin America do have many dangerous areas. A couple African countries are dangerous, though most African countries are quite safe. So you can take precautions. Maybe if you're a young lady, have something to make you more dangerous than your small frame suggests. So I don't know, a pepper spray or a taser or something. I'm not sure, or a handgun. And no, don't go to dangerous areas at night or stuff like that, or call a friend or whatever. But this is not really my area of expertise. But I would note that almost 100% of rape can be avoided. I think it was taking a self-defense class for specifically tuned to avoiding sexual assault was about 95% effective in reducing rape in college students who took this course. So I do know taking precautions is incredibly effective at reducing your chances of something bad happening to you. And one of the things that they did in that study was just telling people to not get too drunk, because sometimes people take advantage of drunk people, and that was a big cause of rape. Benzodiazepines. So here are the two pharmaceutical things you can do. Benzodiazepines are slightly less effective, 3% less effective than an antidepressant, but more effective short term. So if you have to pop a pill to reduce your anxiety right away, and you just pop a pill, it reduces your anxiety, and then you don't need to repeat and take one every day, because they're not for long-term use. More than 2 weeks. So you should not take a anti-anxiety benzodiazepine for more than 2 weeks, else you will have a symptomatic withdrawal. So it is addictive, and if you take it for more than 2 weeks, you will often get addicted to it and have withdrawal symptoms. Benzodiazepines increase the risk of death 1.04 times for low doses, 1.23 times for medium doses, and 1.74 times for high doses. They have a long list of side effects, a long list of withdrawal symptoms. If you are stuck on a benzodiazepine, there is something called the Ashton Manual that goes through how you can withdraw successfully from benzodiazepines, and 90% do withdraw successfully, and actually 50%, around 50%, may have zero withdrawal symptoms. There is a company called Tapering Strip that provides measured doses of medication to slowly reduce your reliance on a benzodiazepine. And you can do this yourself actually with your pills at home. You can switch from a quick-acting to a long-acting benzodiazepine, and measure the dose to reduce it at constant amounts. Antidepressants, 20 to 25% effective in reducing anxiety, 35% effective in another study, 46% effective in another study. This is Clinical Global Impression Severity Scale. This is an anxiety score. It was 7% better than a placebo for this last study here. So there wasn't a huge reduction compared to placebo, but we'll see that again in a second. I do not recommend antidepressants. They have a lot of side effects, and they tend to make you less emotional, and often you can't have sex. So and that's not ideal, because we are wonderful, emotional, sexual creatures quite often, and those are two things that make humans lovely, as compared to robots, perhaps, that are coming down the pipeline. Antidepressants slightly more effective than a benzodiazepine. 70% of those on an antidepressant improved their symptoms of anxiety to a moderate to high degree, versus 66% on a benzodiazepine and 47% on a placebo. So you can see here that there was a 4% better reduction compared to a benzo for an antidepressant, and a 23% better reduction than a placebo for an antidepressant. The number needed, the NNT, the number needed to treat, is 5.15. So you have to treat 5 people for anxiety with an antidepressant to cure 1 person. And that indicates that antidepressants are moderate to low effectiveness. And if you're stuck on an antidepressant, you can go to Tapering Strip, and they provide a protocol to help you get off antidepressants. The references are listed in the description. That is the presentation. So if you have anxiety, I would recommend exercise, yoga, a probiotic. All of these things help the core anxiety issue, and likely they all stack on each other, so they will, exercise helps. Exercise and yoga helps more than them individually, and exercise and yoga and a probiotic helps more than doing one of them individually. And I would recommend inositol or sarcosine or passion flower or some of the other supplements, or lavender, as a quick thing you can take to reduce anxiety. If you have panic, and you're in a panicky situation and you feel yourself kind of losing control, take some lavender, take some inositol, take some passion flower, take some sarcosine, and that should as effectively reduce your anxiety as a benzodiazepine. But it may be good to have a benzodiazepine on hand still, if you feel like, if you have a prescription. I know it's sometimes hard to get a prescription for these things, so it is easier to get a natural supplement in most countries, and I would recommend them as being safer than a man-made chemical. So these are natural substances, and sometimes when you create a synthetic substance, they are not as good, but sometimes they are actually better. So it's really by a case-by-case situation. But in this case, the natural substances are likely better. So thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And please share this with any of your friends or family members who are dealing with anxiety issues. And leave a comment of a suggestion or of any feedback, or just to say thank you. And I will let you go. Have a good night and take care. Bye.